Good morning.
All right. I want to call to order the special call meeting for today. Madam Clerk, could you give me a roll call?
Good morning. Roll call for today, April 13th, special call meeting. Excuse me. Councilmember Rao,
Present.
Councilmember Gomes,
Present.
Councilmember Willis,
Present.
Councilmember Gilliard, Councilmember Reeves,
Accounted for.
Councilmember Khalid, Councilmember Baker, present also is Mr. Donald, City Manager, Ms. Walker, City Attorney. You have a quorum, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Madam Clerk. I want to thank you all for being here this morning. I know it was a hectic night last night, but we're glad here in the city of South Fulton that we had minimal damage from the storm by way of limbs and power line down. But we're glad that everybody was safe. Let me say something here before we go on to call the item. I understand, and I really feel that everyone, well, majority of us on the city council believe that we should have some sort of what people have called hazard pay. What I have done is I have asked the staff and the city manager to go back and look at how we can do this and bring a proposal to us today. You will notice that there is no resolution on the agenda today that speaks to this, because we want to have an open and honest discussion as to how we're going to be able to do it. And then at the end of this meeting, hopefully we would have pulled some things together to bring back a resolution at our next meeting. I think the staff has done an outstanding job, and what I would ask us to do is allow the staff to go through their presentation, and once their presentation is finished, then we will come in for questions and things of that nature. So at this time, Mr. City Manager, would you go through your presentation for us?
Yes, sir. That works for me. I'm assuming the clerk's office is going to have it take over the screen and show it. And for the edification of the public, I don't know how we're showing this, but we have posted it on the city's COVID-19 page. So it's easily downloadable, not only for our residents and our impacted staff, but also for council members who like to download it individually, print it, and follow it on their own. You're able to do that as well. So today, our focus is just really on looking at the city's financial position and presenting a proposal that we're calling the Gladiator Benefits Program. And so you can go to the next slide. The reason we're calling it that is because we do want to highlight that our program is not a normal hazard pay benefit, mainly because the city's fiscal position truly does not, under our advisement, allow for a cash payout, although we would be honest, that would be our preference. The first thing is just to remind everyone, we have posted quite a few different memorandums and distributed them highlighting the city's fiscal position. And so the first slide just kind of highlights that we do project a severe decrease in revenue collections. The city treasurer has not provided an official statement or projections on what those revenue dips look like, but we do believe that that is forthcoming. What he has provided is a kind of nuts and bolts analysis that shows what our cash available is, and if everything remains the same, and since these projections have come out, as you know, nothing has remained the same. So this was the rosy pie in the sky visual. It would show by a very minimal amount we would have approximately $4 million to carry into the new fiscal year. As a reminder, last year, despite our deficit, our revenue collections peaked and our spending remained substantially under budget. And so because of that, we rolled over in excess of $10 million into this fiscal year. That has allowed us to maintain our current position, but what it shows is that this year we would be reducing that 10 million down to a $4 million rollover, which is dangerous for a city of our age and lack of resources, especially knowing that revenue collections would be decreasing. You can go to the next slide. And so I have under my authority, as a reminder, the city treasurer in that capacity reports directly to the council, but as the CFO, he reports to me. And so I have requested that he provide projections related to our 2021 fiscal position. And he is confident that he would have those back to us by the next meeting. So they're forthcoming, but not fully ready today. What we do know is that the city entered into this fiscal year with a budget deficit of approximately 7 million. I think prior to cutting the budget down, it was around 8.5. We reduced it to a little under 7 million and project some additional decreases to the budget deficit as well moving forward. And so these current preliminary projections do show that our revenue would decrease somewhere between 9 and 20%. That was assuming that the coronavirus pandemic would subside at some point in May with a form of regular activities returning in June. You'll see from the federal government, those timelines have changed quite a bit, with some folks projecting that day-to-day normalcy may not return until the end of the fiscal year around August and September. And so some of the early, in this slide, I just kind of highlighted that some of the early projections that we've seen from cities as large as San Francisco, who has an approximately $3 billion budget, are expecting that they will have significant revenue decreases, and they report a $1 billion shortfall. Alpharetta, which is one of our neighbors who we look at, very closely and kind of aspire to financially, they are already seeing an approximate 30% dip in their upcoming budget collections. And this is only from hotel motel tax collections. They project about $1 million decrease, 30% just on hotel motel, not to include their property tax and other revenues, which will also decrease. I think Cobb County is another great example of the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic is having on government, where they have already projected a $30 million budget shortfall, and that is for this fiscal year as a result of the end of their 2019 budget. So you can go to the next slide. So with that, Mr. Adams, you can go to the next slide. So with that, I think one thing that I would encourage the council to consider is to take advantage of the current financial markets and things that are available to us now. And so this is a city manager recommendation. As I alluded to earlier, the city treasurer reports to you. He's not publicly weighed in on this just yet, but in looking at some of the things that are available, I think we've all read about the various things that the Federal Reserve has done to lower interest rates. I've just included one of those activities that this new municipal liquidity facility provides us an opportunity to better manage our cash flow and have access to resources. I think you've seen that GMA has some offerings as well. We also have the traditional TAN, which is on the next slide, which we can go to that slide, where you can always, utilize a TAN to kind of ensure. And I think our city treasurer has provided information that our primary banking institution, BB&T, is ready to provide us a TAN if we so please. At this time, whether it be commercial, public financing, even day-to-day for our residents, the actual rates to borrow money are at some of the lowest in recent history. And so I think that is something that, while we have a strong fiscal position, or I won't say strong, I actually say a stable fiscal position, something that we should look at, or as my recommending that we look at, is taking advantage of the borrower's market to ensure that we have the revenues in place to assist us through Corona recovery. And as we have led the region in making decisions on behalf of our government and our residents programmatically, I think we also have to do the same thing financially and ensure that we're looking at that. And so I think that kind of sets the tone for the programming that we're recommending today. And so, Mr. Adams, you can go to the next slide. And so, as we look at providing hazard pay, we do have some good examples of what other governments have done. The government, the federal government and the Department of Labor defines hazard pay as any additional pay for performing hazardous duty or working in physical hardship. And so I think it's important to really look at that and kind of break it down, because I believe we have received notice from our insurance provider, GERMA, and others, that while we are going to make an effort to ensure that we provide the safest environment and provide an extra benefit for our essential staff members, technically the the COVID-19 pandemic is not considered a hazard, or has not been declared a hazard by the federal government. I think they plan to do so, which is why they are looking at providing a hazard pay benefit for state and local governments. But currently, certain responses that have been given to GERMA would say that the COVID-19 pandemic is a virus or disease that is accessible and equally as dangerous to our residents, our staff, our elected and administrative leaders as it is to anyone. And so for that reason, it's almost as common as the common cold. And so they have not declared it something that is hazardous. And I think that is something important to kind of know as we make this fairly progressive decision. When you look at the city of Atlanta, they have provided a hazard pay that equates to about $500 a month, but they have made some edits. From talking to their staff, they have provided some time off as an option as well, reducing their hourly performance to about 32 hours a week versus 40. I think Henry County's benefit was at around $250 a month. And I believe Clayton County had a proposal, but it did not pass, at least at the time and the information that I had in making this presentation. And so to just look at those cities or municipalities or public organizations, as a reminder, Atlanta has a $1 billion budget. They're also projecting a shortfall of, I think I read, around 40 million. Henry and Clayton are both projecting shortfalls. And so a shortfall for a government that is as large as theirs means something very different than it does for the city of South Fulton, who entered the year with a deficit where all of these government had healthy financial positions. If you go to the next slide, as we have come up with this benefit, Mr. Adams, you can go to the next slide. when you look at making this type of decision, we wanted to make sure we were extremely thorough in doing so. You one slide ahead of me, Mr. Adams. So we reached out to 18 different public sector organizations, ranging from the city of Albany, that is being hit very hard by this, with their residents as well as their administration of services. I think we mentioned Henry. We've also had conversations with DeKalb, Gwinnett, Coweta, Cobb, Union City, folks from all over. And this is just local. On the national level, we have also had meetings and calls with the District of Columbia. We have the city of Oakland, the city of San Francisco, also the city of Dallas, and the suburb right outside of Houston. I apologize for not remembering their names, but we have kind of looked at this nationally and leveraged our relationships to get as much information as possible. And one thing that we have learned is that there is no one size fits all to this, and everyone is doing something different. If you go to that next slide, I think one thing that we have to consider when doing a hazard pay, while it may not be a popular position, when you look at everyone that we've talked to, but specifically those who have provided hazard pay to date, despite our fiscal position being less stable than all of those governments in every category, with the exception of 4. So that's 4 out of roughly 15. We provide higher pay, even with hazard pay, than any of these cities. And so I think this is a consideration that we took into account and what we maintain. I think the other thing that we looked at is that as we look at hazard pay, the total amount at the highest level would be Atlanta, of the benefit for a 3-month period roughly equates to $1,500 total per person. I think what we have looked at is, as we decide on what type of hazard benefit, we would want to continue ensuring that the total value of our benefit exceeds those of others, but does not immediately put us in a place, just to be as frank as possible, that we couldn't continue delivering services and operate government, or negatively impact employees who are not able to work day to day at no fault of their own, meaning through a reduction in force or furloughs. Also staying completely transparent and honest, that based on our cash flow analysis, and only the preliminary has been provided by the CFO, if the coronavirus pandemic lasts for an extended period of time, we must look at first furloughs and then reductions in force. So not providing or taking a hard stance that we have to research strongly a hazard pay benefit is one that is basically based on ensuring that our government remains vital, and the 3 years of work that has been put in by all stakeholders, including our residents, is not lost based on this pandemic. And so there are some tough recommendations and decisions that sit before our council, but I would like for the public as well as our elected body to know that, the best research possible is being done. And the goal that is most important is to ensure that government continues to deliver services, people remain employed, and our residents remain not only safe and healthy, but also able to receive the level of service that they expect during and after the pandemic. You can go to the next slide. And so as we look at our situation, we have 274 essential employees, and we took an extra step that none of these other governments, to my knowledge, in those, let's say, 35 different telephone calls, email surveys, and everything we looked at, we are the only government that actually polled our staff members to be able to get feedback from them on what is important and valuable to them in us delivering some type of benefit. I think that's important because what you'll see from the survey results is that they are just as split as our public, potentially our elected officials, and in all honesty, our administration when it comes to what is the appropriate type of benefit for them. So of the 274 employees, and I will also say I'm thankful for the responding rate that we had. We released it on Friday and closed it on Easter Sunday, which is a pretty short turnaround, but we did want to make sure we gave them an opportunity to weigh in while also getting the information back to you guys. And so we had 160 people respond. As you know, when you do surveys, most times the response rate is less than 10%. This had a 60% response rate. So I do trust the responses to this survey. So code is likely our smallest. Code in public works and parks are our lowest number of essential staff persons, but they were also the lowest respondent. So that in that way, the information is a little bit skewed. And so if you go to the next slide, I think there are just some interesting considerations for the council, and I think you'll understand why we proposed the Gladiator benefit in the way that we did. So the first thing is that it's almost split, almost 50-50. It's 52 to 48 that of our 160 respondents, they're split on whether they see a value in a non-cash benefit. And I will be honest with you, I'll be frank with you that I do not believe that the city has the financial position to deliver a cash benefit at this time. And a non-cash benefit does weaken our fiscal position overall, but it is the right thing to do to provide a level of benefit. And so I want to make sure I state that. And so it's a very tough decision. The second piece is that would they be in favor of receiving a non-cash benefit that increases over time? It was equally split, but the slight majority was interested in that and did favor having that as an option. Additionally, receiving a cash benefit, even if it hinders the city's ability to pay other staff members, 56% of our respondents were willing to receive a cash benefit, even if it hindered us being able to pay other employees. And so I will state on the record that at no time whatsoever would I recommend to the council to provide a cash benefit at the detriment of our other non-essential staff. And so again, I know that may not be a favorable position, but that is my position as city manager providing advisement. The second piece, the fourth pullout is, would you be willing to receive a non-cash benefit in support of the city's ability to pay others? 56% of those respondents who responded to that were in favor of receiving the benefit, which would allow people to continue to be paid. And so what you'll see is that of these 160 respondents, everyone was kind of split. And the most important thing is that they receive a benefit, but overwhelmingly, approximately 90% believed that it should be retroactive and not to a specific date, but to some date, because they believe, and I agree, that the service has been provided throughout the pandemic, and providing some type of retroactive benefit, which would allow their benefit to be the most valuable, is what everyone was pretty much in favor of. Although there appear to be a small group, which again I'm very appreciative of, who understand that the longer the benefit is retroactive, to the greater detriment it is to the city's financial position. I think less than 50% of them prefer that the benefits start at the time of implementation, but it was split almost 50% down the middle. And what that would say to me is that they do understand, our employees do understand the city's financial position. And if they receive a benefit, even if it is not retroactive, they understand that the city is taking great lengths to provide them with a resource. I think, in our meetings, I speak pretty frankly, so I don't know if the example that I'm using is the correct one, but I use the example of, if it's two guys competing for the same young lady's attention, if I've got $100 and the other guy has $20 and she asks for 20 and he gives her his last 20 and I give her 20 of the 100 I have, which one is really the most valuable to her? And so I think what this survey shows is that they understand, our staff understands that, Atlanta and some of these other folks have a stronger fiscal position than us. And so they understand that this benefit may not be cash and it may not be retroactive, even though I do have a recommendation that would make it retroactive, in that they understand the great lengths that we're taking in considering a hazard pay benefit. You can go to the next slide. And so, in addition to that, we did some demographic information that will also illuminate some of the background on potentially why some of the positions are as it is. And it kind of shows that the bulk of our staff are not necessarily residents of the city of South Fulton, which doesn't, they still provide an amazing service, but I think the insights related to how the city's finances impact our staff, the if you are a resident and you see how your taxes are broken out and where they go and things of that nature. So sometimes that level of knowledge and education gives you additional insight. And so when you look at the responses, it's almost broken down in that level of knowledge. I think the other piece is the great bulk of our staff would have, or 45%, let me say that, about 45% have 5 years of experience or less. With such a limited amount of experience, you would imagine that a cash benefit, for those folks, a non-cash benefit would mean a lot more than to someone who has a lot longer experience and is closer to retirement. Well, you have contributed, you have this deferred compensation, and so you're closer to the end of your career. And so cash on hand right now means a lot more. And so I think that also has an impact on what the outcomes of the survey and the desires of our essential staff members who are contributing, but also have a need for relief in their day-to-day lives. It impacts their responding and their desires. And so you can go to the next slide. I think another important thing that we included in our survey, data doesn't always tell the story. And so we had over 100 comments from the 160 respondents, and it was optional, not required. And so for those, we had, about, I think it was around 50 that just gave a simple thank you for consideration or thank you in general. Where we had some others, who were kind of torn, some who said, listen, I'm a public servant. I understood the hazards of, this before I came on, And so my biggest concern is, are you going to take care of me if I get sick? That's we are. And I think that's a big deal and a big consideration. And so the levity of these decisions are some things that are not lost. I think also, there were some who said, listen, I want my benefit regardless of whether it's positive or negative detriment to the city. Others who said, I don't mind a deferred benefit, but it is extremely difficult to get time off because we are understaffed. And so, if we get one, would it be a consideration that at some point in time we're able to cash it out because there's no clarity on when I would be able to take the time. And so I think taking all of those things into consideration, I'll be honest with you, you probably hear my voice cracking, been up, I can't say been up since when just not just me, but our entire executive staff has been up, since this thing started. But last night, the meeting ended at 4 a.m. This morning, still tinkering with our recommendation, which is why you don't have the presentation in front of you until now, because we wanted to get it right. And so the Gladiator Benefits Program is presented to provide essential staff members some type of structured benefit that would serve as hazard compensation, but creating a longer term pay incentive in lieu of one-time cash payments. And so to give you a high level summary, it grows like a stock investment where the value increases over time. But if the federal or state government provides a supplemental benefit as is being proposed, we have written this program up and will work with the city attorney to deliver a resolution, if approved, that would transition all hours to the highest level of cash benefit available by law and through the federal government. And so that is the general summary, but of course I'll go into detail, but I just wanted to repeat that to make it clear for anybody who's not a technical expert or someone who reads in between the lines. Our program is a non-cash benefit initially that provides people the opportunity to receive a new leave category that grows in value over time and has a cash value to it that is limited initially but grows. And I have an illumination of that included in the program. But at any time that the federal government or the state government provides a supplemental benefit, it immediately transitions into cash that we will then be reimbursed from the federal or state government for. And so you can go to the next slide. So the breakdown of the actual benefit is, one, we have taken into account folks' desire to have additional time off included in whatever benefit is provided. And so the proposed resolution would vest the authority in the department head level. So I would ask that it be provided to the city manager, and then programmatically, I would delegate that authority to those individual department heads to provide an adjusted work schedule. The reason for this is because each department operates very different, where some have very simple straight line schedules, which would be CDRA, where the shifts in police are 12-hour shifts. And so reducing their schedule would have to be done one way, wherein fire, they have a very different and more complex model. I think it also, what people are not thinking about and talking about publicly is that folks are no longer able to work their extra jobs. And so not only are they receiving compensation from us and overtime in certain areas, but while they were already receiving that, many of them were working extra jobs where they would get an additional benefit. And so while they're not receiving that benefit, what we want to do is if we cannot provide an elevated cash payout, we would want to ensure that they're able to receive at least their same pay and get the benefit of time with their families where applicable. Additionally, this paid leave category would be completely separate from the annual and regular vacation leave payouts. That way, the valuation of this leave could increase similarly as, we've got a cost of living adjustment that is coming up that we have recommended providing 3% split over 2 years, which was our initial recommendation. Of course, we'll have to look back at it, but we want to ensure that this benefit grows at the same rate. In addition, I think I've already talked about, having a cash payout to where if stimulus funding became available, then the payout would be according with the policy and approved legislation that governs our reimbursement eligibility and makes it very easily for folks to be able to cash out on it in real time. You can go to the next slide. In addition to that, all of these essential frontline and first responders, they're needed for us to continue, our daily operational life. So the flexible shift scheduling and paid leave would be made effective during the period of April 13th. And that's a typo here, that the flexible leave scheduling would be authorized this week, and then the actual leave accrual would be backdated to no later than April 27th. We would be crunching the numbers to see if the fiscal impact would allow us to bring it back to the 13th, but I am personally fairly comfortable that we could, no matter when you pass it, we would be able to adjust those leave balances to April 27th. Now, the vesting period is something that I will tell you, it has been a point of contention internally amongst our administrative leaders. And it's one that I'm not sure is very popular, but I think what is also important is that, everyone doesn't understand the level of he has made in its employees, and areas for which our account on a very, thin limb to make sure that our retention rates, which you saw from the previous correspondence, are very strong. As a new city, we have retained quite a bit of our employee base. And despite, I think when you look at these other, even the North Fulton cities, their early 10 years, their retention rates were at around 35 to 40%, where we are exceeding about 80%. A lot of that is because you've invested in your employees, making them the highest paid in the region, but also our benefits program at which they accrue is also the highest in the region. It's actually the highest and most flexible in the region. And so as such, I think it's only right that if we put our financial position in, some form of limbo in investing in this benefit, that we ask that those who receive it, have to stay with the city for a certain period of time. And if they leave, then the value decreases. Just like it increases over time, it should also have a lesser value over time if you voluntarily separate from the city. And so our vesting schedule would say that if you stay with the city only through the projected time of April to June, and that's the current projections of the corona pandemic, then you would get 25% of the benefit. This is another reason why we want it in a separate leave category. You would receive 25% of the total value of the benefit. If you stay until September, which gets us through the end of the fiscal year, where our position should be a little stronger as we would now be collecting revenues, that would do 50%. If you stayed through the first quarter of the next fiscal year, then you would receive 75%. And then if you stay a year after the pandemic was declared, you would be eligible for 100% of the benefit and be fully vested upon leaving, which allows the city enough time to potentially recover after the coronavirus pandemic. Now, what I would say to the council is if you are friendly to this program overview, I would ask for the flexibility to look at this vesting schedule prior to making it final. And I say that because as we move forward, the pandemic is lasting longer and longer, and our financial position becomes weaker and weaker. And so the number one thing that we have to do for the benefit of our employees, our residents, and ourselves is ensure that government continues. And to do so, we have to have, we're not the federal government, we don't print money. And so as we move forward, we've got to make sure that our fiscal decisions are prudent, and this vesting schedule is not made up money. These are real dollars that we would have to pay out at some point within the city's history. And it would continue to grow every day, just like the value of all of our other benefits. And so as we develop it, I would ask for the flexibility to adjust that vesting period, maybe making it longer, maybe making it weaker, depending on the other decisions that you make that we've discussed prior. So the next recommendation and proposed next steps would be to develop a formal resolution sponsored by the City of South Fulton's mayor and council authorizing this benefit, and the proposed date of implementation would be May 1st, with the benefit potentially becoming retroactive to April 13th or April 27th. And this would require a future meeting of the mayor and council to take place at some time in April of 2020, which would be my request. And so with that, I apologize for the lengthy presentation, but I wanted to be as thorough and as frank as possible. And I would accept any questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. And ladies and gentlemen, that is our Gladiator Benefits Program. The first person in the queue now is Mr. Khalid.
Put me in the queue, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Can you all hear me?
Mr. Baker, you don't have a computer there?
I don't have that option up here. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. It's okay. Mr. Khalid, go ahead.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Mr. Donald. This was, I think this is a brilliant alternative considering our, where we are fiscally. I do want to start by saying that I think that it's going to be important for us as a city in terms of getting back to normal, getting more aggregated data specifically for South Fulton. And I'm not sure if we do that through the county health departments or through the state health departments. But what we do know is that of the cases where that have been identified by race, 50% of them are African Americans. And so as the Blackest city in America, that is important for us, I think, in terms of reaching economic stability, is investing in making sure that we have a heat map of those cases, investing in testing programs, because being able to figure out if we've established a herd immunity through either exposure and recovery, just through whatever, is going to be critical. I know that here on Old National, a lot of our workers are essential workers, right? And so they're still going to work every day. And so I would like for us to have a conversation at some point about how we subsidize or support testing services in our city. As far as I know, we only have this one place on Old National, but subsidizing the testing programs and also contact tracing, which is something that we know through other communicable diseases, helps lower the spread of the disease. We are few industries that is still paying full employment for all of our workers. So I think that is to be commended. There are a lot of people that are out of work. You mentioned, though, that by not providing hazard pay, we would be able to postpone possible furloughs. And I'm wondering if, my first question is whether you or Frank can give any information on a date where that might begin to happen.
When potential furloughs would begin to happen?
Yes.
So currently, our current projections, and again, I've asked Mr. Malazi to come up with more detailed projections based on the extension of the pandemic. I would ask that he be able to go through April 15th because nothing would have changed so much by then, but he would be able to look at the March 31st revenue collections, which only gives us a snapshot because the pandemic would have only been 2 weeks old, but to look at any potential trends that he might see, as well as the trends through April 15th to come up with new projections, because we also would have received additional revenue at that time. But currently,
Go ahead.
But currently, if we do not extend any additional expenditures and we follow the recommendations that I proposed earlier about reducing the contracts that would not be considered vital and mandatory, then we would not have to have furloughs, nor would we have to have reductions in force. And note, they would come in that order. At least my recommendation would be that they come in that order. And so
by
currently,
doing,
we do not expect to happen.
just to be clear, by doing none of these programs, do we buy like 2 more weeks, another month? Like how much more time do we buy? How much more time do we buy to keep everyone on the payroll if we do not do this program is really my question.
So this program does not have a cash payout available in it until after the end of the fiscal year, basically. And
Okay.
so with that being said, we're still on track to last the entire year.
So this program, basically, you're saying it's revenue neutral in terms of changing the date that we would have to start furloughs.
Correct.
Okay. You talked about reimbursement.
And so that is correct. I think the only caveat, I think there is a caveat to that, council member. I think the only caveat is that while it's unlikely, if we had a certain number, which again, I've asked for some time to develop that, but let's call it 20 or more essential staff members were to leave within that first quarter of the vesting period, while the value of the benefit would be minimal, it would adjust our total financial picture of cash on hand because those dollars would be paid out immediately upon separation.
And thank you for that. I think that it's critical that we look at perhaps extending the vesting period in order to match the timeline of this crisis. So as this crisis evolves, I believe, and I don't know if we need to set a longer vesting period because it's kind of it provides some sort of insecurity or instability to have a vesting period that keeps changing because the crisis keeps changing. So I think we need to look at the vesting period. The reimbursement checks, you said they would come according to what is provided by the federal government. It is my understanding now that the federal government has only approved cash payments for EMS workers. Is that true? And if that is the case, could we see a situation where only EMS workers would get that additional cash payment because that's all the federal government approved?
Well, so that's not necessarily true. So there's a current stimulus package that is out there that does address EMS services and things of that nature. But there is a separate proposal, and I'm nonpartisan, but to the credit of some of those, they've reached out to us who are part of NFBPA and ICMA and other regional leadership roles for us to give opinions and insights on the forthcoming bills. And so what we have provided, what we have provided is that this benefit be for essential workers, and that the local governments that at minimum would be states, but our preference is local governments, define what essential is, and thus that definition of essential would receive the reimbursement. I think the other question that you asked was around the liability. And so while I did ask for the ability to look at the vesting schedule before it is made final, you should note that this is a liability that has no current fiscal impact, but is deferred to the future. And so that vesting period allows us to defer it, but I would caution us in deferring it too long, because the purpose is to allow folks to benefit now. The one point in that is that the reason that I am asking to allow us to have the discrepancy in delivering that benefit that way is because if someone needs to take time off or access that benefit prior, let's say they have a sick mother or child or cousin or whatever it is, we want the flexibility to where they can access the benefit, whether it be cash or time through a hardship waiver that would first go to the department head and then ultimately to me as city manager.
Okay, I hear that. I just want us to be careful. I want us to be cautious in not extending benefits to people that have not been covered under current federal reimbursement policies, because then we're making ourselves financially liable for things that have not yet passed, if they haven't passed. But my final question, because I know other people have questions.
I have some more people in the queue.
Yeah, this is my final question. What mentioned that one of the big concerns of our staff is, would we take care of them if they were sick? And so I want to understand, if someone doing essential services contracts coronavirus in the course of their essential service work, have we made any commitment to cover their medical expenses?
Yeah, so our insurance and our additional benefits are all available and accessible. None of them have been reduced, nor will they be reduced. Again, I think we have one of the stronger benefits programs in the region. And so depending on what their coverage says, they are covered. But one thing that we have provided as an extra step, and kudos to Mr. Williams from our risk management team, is we've established a direct contact portal. And I think the 26 persons who were exposed but did not contract that we've reported on in the past have received everything from telemedicine to access to testing, et cetera, et cetera. And so those things remain in place, and our commitment remains the strongest in the region. And we, expect to continue leading in that way, because we won't come off of any of the commitments that we've made.
Thank you so much for that, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Khalid. Mr. Baker, you kind of got in before your machine was working, so I'm going to allow you to speak, but I'm going to remove you off the existing speaker queue now. Is that okay, Mr. Baker?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Baker.
Okay. Thanks. And thank you, Mr. Dono, and thanks to the city manager, the assistant city manager as well, and the department heads as well, for figuring out a manner that's conducive to our government. In particular, I know that we as a council may have had several ideas, laced with our personal passion, but as you've stated in this proposal, that our government has to continue. And I'd like to thank you and Ms. Winfield for not growing weary with me and others, bearing down on you concerning this solution regarding hazard pay for our quote unquote gladiators.
Yeah, And I give you your kudos for helping to come up with that name. So I appreciate all of you guys, all of our council members. It doesn't always get out to the public, but these, it's not just staff having 2, 3 a.m. calls, but many of you I've talked to early in the morning. Some of y'all heard me doing everything from disciplining my kids to making lunch. And so I appreciate y'all spending time and bearing with us as we all kind of adjust to the new normal and helping to come up with these coin phrases and creative benefits.
Yeah, thanks, and I appreciate that because I felt you did hijack it, but I let it go. But either way it goes, still, I think that it needs to be said or just glazed over a bit again that we're a new city, and as a new city, we had a projection to be out of the red in about 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And with what you're proposing, it works. And the possibility of federal compensation is also something to, look forward to as well. But the options for time, to many employees, time may be more important than the actual work, but the flexibility allows the suitability for all employees, regardless of their situation. But I just wanted to also, thank Mr. Malazi as well for what he's doing, and you all just working together in general. And lastly, I wanted to say thanks for considering our employees. Thanks for giving them an opportunity and consideration. I can tell that it made them feel good to be considered, just off by looking at the responses that you showed us. And, people, especially during this time, they don't, we'll say a lot of things and people will hear a lot of things and people might forget the words, but they won't forget how you made them feel during this time. But kudos to you, Mr. Donald, and your team for this feasible solution.
Well, so I will tell you that when it came to reaching out to folks, Chief Meadows has been a great advocate for police. I think, Mr. Sterling Jones has been a great advocate for fire, and Ms. Reed for CDRA. But I would also want to highlight, Mr. Brian Morris, who from code enforcement provided some insights. Miss Andrea Hall, who oversees or leads the Captain Hall, I apologize, not Miss, but Captain Hall, for providing different suggestions that they have gotten directly from frontline staff. And so, look, everybody is not going to be happy. I think you saw that from the survey. But I will say that, from my beginning here and all of our staff leaders, we have tried our best to ensure that whether we go with the recommendations or not, there's always consideration and a listening ear to our staff. And so I appreciate those leaders, just giving us the opportunity to receive and share information. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks so much. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I don't know what I'm doing sometimes, but thank you for following
Thank you, Mr. Baker. No problem. I'm going to bring in Councilwoman Guns.
Good morning. Again, thank you, Mr. Donald, for this. I think Councilman Khalid touched on a lot of things that were of concern, especially understanding that the cities of color are being hit significantly hard from this virus. I just was on a report that I believe the city of New Orleans is facing $150 million deficit. So it will be very prudent for us to kind of understand. And I'm trying to encourage Mr. Malazi to provide us with that data so we can actually see where we are looking or what our future is going to look like, as we probably are about to almost hit our peak. But some of the questions that I have is this Gladiator program, has this been modeled in other cities? And if so, what cities that I can go and kind of research?
So it's actually a hodgepodge of all of those cities. So, I've had the pleasure of speaking with a representative from each of those local cities listed on the presentation, as well as these cities from around the country. And we've taken a little bit of everything because, just to be frank with you, of about the 35, 37 folks that we've talked to, there are only about 10 that are providing a hazard benefit. And of those, most of them are providing the cash benefit. But when we're talking about the city of Atlanta, DeKalb County, the city of San Francisco, the city of Oakland, I mean, if you look at their departmental budgets are 3 times the size of our city budget. And so putting that into context, that's also why their deficits are projected to be larger than ours. But we also entered in with a new deficit, which is where that challenge is. And so this is a one-of-a-kind benefit, but I'll also say it's not a complicated one. It is essentially saying you've got annual leave, you've got annual vacation, and you've got sick, and then you've got comp time. Well, this is creating an additional benefit that is a hybrid of comp time and sick, in the manner of you would collect it and accrue it just like you would your annual and sick leave, but the value of it increases over time. So it's just like if I put $100,000 into my 401k and the city matches it at 20,000. Well, that value of 20,000, it does not have 100% value until I'm vested. So in year 1, in the city's example, you're 20% vested. Year 2, you're 40. Year 3, you're 50, until you get to year 5, where we are 100% vested. We're basically doing a vesting schedule on this new quote unquote annual leave policy.
Okay, thank you. Now, also too, is there an expiration on benefits? So for instance, if I'm an employee and I don't want to actually take my payout maybe a year or a year and a half, is there an expiration on benefits of when they need to take the benefits?
So I am proposing not to have one, because the value of the benefit does not exponentially increase. So while the vesting schedule is rigid to give us enough time to be able to recover and make collections, the value, we want it to have the most value to them, because it's going to be a limited pool. So come hell or high water, this pandemic will subside, at least initially, which we would recommend in your resolution, let's say within the next 6 months. And so that would say the value or the number of hours accrued would end after that period. So it would sit there as a bank of hours the same way as your vacation time. And so let's say someone runs out of vacation, they run out of sick, they would have this additional bank that's always available. But also if they leave in 2 years, this bank that has that value that hasn't necessarily increased would still remain available for them as a cash payout, and the delayed time period would be long enough to where the city could pay it without issue.
Okay, understood. I have 2 more quick questions.
Yes, ma'am.
So also too, so what if an employee who gets sick and will have to be out of work, is there kind of like a stopgap, and are they still eligible to receive the Gladiator benefits?
So no, ma'am. If you are out, so you would remember you would still be accruing vacation and sick, and so you would have to work. Let's say, and I'm just using an example, so I don't hold me to this. This is just for this conversation. But let's say the shift to collect the benefit requires 40 hours, and let's say you take a sick day, or you got to tend to mama, or you got to do whatever you have to do, and you could only work the 32. Well, if you would be able to, you would still be attached to the city, so you're still accruing vacation and sick time, but you would not accrue the Gladiator benefit.
So
But
even if they're out sick with the virus, is what I'm saying, would they still be
so if
able
you're out
to?
sick with, because because this is an added benefit. So you would still be collecting your regular benefit. So if you're out sick, but you're attached to the city, you're still collecting vacation and sick, but you wouldn't collect an additional benefit.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. And my last question, and I've been seeing this in other municipalities. So if a city employee, God forbids, passes, unfortunately, due to the coronavirus, and if we're able to receive that cash payout, is there a way, if they have this time on the books, that they are able to transfer it to a family member?
Oh, yeah. So your benefits go to your beneficiaries. And I know that HR is doing a review of everyone having a beneficiary listed, because I just received notice that I haven't listed beneficiaries on, I guess, my life insurance or something of that note. So, but yeah, absolute payout of all leave, including sick.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That concludes my questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
And
you,
I
Ms.
know
Gumbs.
Mayor Her and Councilmember Khalid mentioned something that I did not get to respond to, and it's
Go right
about
ahead.
the racial data. And so I know you and I have talked about this, and it is the plan of both the mayor and I to provide a written request to the county and all parties making that request. I think that as a part of the resolution, you could also provide that request on the data as well. That is a state level function, but I do know that we can petition our county to provide that information and also join us in a request to the governor's office, which would probably make it stronger. The letter that would come from the mayor and myself is probably extremely strongly worded. And so I have taken some time to pull it back and appropriately provide it in the spirit of partnership. But I would want you to know that that has not been lost on me. We know that we need that data and information, and correspondence is forthcoming.
Okay.
Let
Thank you.
me add to that, Councilwoman Gumbs. There's been 2 attempts to give us information from the county, and both of those attempts have been inaccurate.
Yep.
And I forward correspondence to the county manager as to a better way to provide that data for us. And one of the ways we think is the better way is that they do it from GIS. The information that they had, believe it or not, came from UPS. And so they're still working on a way in which we can get that valuable data and make it accurate. Okay?
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, Councilwoman Willis.
Yes. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Donald, for coming up with a resolve. As you know, I've been very adamant about this issue. Employees have been reaching out to me like crazy. And so I think this benefit addresses a lot of it addresses everything that I asked to look into. Number one, let me ask one question. How much time are they accruing a month on this?
So this would, I believe it is 8 additional hours a month.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. 8.
Basically one day equates to 1 day off per month, a full shift, basically. Yeah, let me not say 8 hours. Let me say a full shift, because remember, when you look at police and fire, they're doing 12 hours, 8 hours for others. And so let's just categorize it as a full shift. And on the record, I would like to note that my recommendation in the resolution, if it goes into that level of detail, would specifically state that, or either defer it to us, knowing that our intent is for a full shift. Because if you get into hours, each one of the impacted essential service areas has different shifts.
So it's 1 hour per shift, which is
No, one shift per month. So one shift for me technically would be 8 hours, whereas one shift for police would be 12, but for CDRA, it might be 8. And if it were parks, it might be 6. I mean, the shifts are different based on the service area. So depending on the service area, they would get one shift off, or the value of one shift per month.
The value of one shift per month. So
Police do 12-hour days, so it would be essentially 12 hours for them. Whereas again, someone else may do 8 hours a day, and so they get 8 hours. We wouldn't want to do 8 hours for police and then short them 4 hours on
right.
the benefit.
Okay, and then this goes back into April, and this will go long as the pandemic, or we right now initially doing April, May, June as recommended.
Yeah, so I think that's a part of the formal recommendation that would come forward.
Okay.
The initial piece was through June, but as you've seen in CNN and some of the others, the models have changed and been extended. And so I need time to review the data with these subject matter experts to make sure that we're making an appropriate recommendation to the council. So what I have for you now is preliminary.
Okay. And so just for my understanding, basically what this benefit is doing is it's a non-cash payment, which will allow employees to accrue leave over time, but it also to protect the city from having to pay out if employees leave at a high rate, which I doubt, because according to the research that I requested, I requested for research to see the terms in the first and second quarter. And we got as many as 12 just in the first and second quarter. So and if you look at per division, our employees are not leaving at a high rate. But in case we do have a mass exodus, which I doubt, there is a vesting limitation. So did I sum that up correctly?
To a certain extent, I think the thing that I would caution you on in saying that is that even if it's one employee, it instantly becomes a cash payout, which was not budgeted for. And so it becomes an unbudgeted expense that it becomes a fiscal liability as soon as it's in place. And so while it becomes a huge detriment if we have a lot of employees leave, there's a negative impact for each employee that would leave. And so I would prefer to categorize it as deferred compensation that has a cash benefit to it. And so remember, if we receive the ability to leverage federal or state funds, then it immediately transitions into a cash benefit that is paid out. If it remains, it operates the same way as your sick and annual leave and compensatory time, to where it does have a cash value to it. And so that I would rather explain it or discuss it as deferred compensation.
Okay.
It is a new category of deferred compensation that has an increased value proposition.
Okay, and so one of the things that I'm confident about is, and I think based on your research, I'm confident that we will be able to go after those federal funds. And in one of the earlier emails that I sent to you, I recommended that we do some type of comp payout and then get reimbursed once those funds come in. I understand you're being careful in saying that, if we are able to get it, but I'm confident if, with the talent that we have, that we do have staff that will be able to do whatever it takes to go after those funding. And so I appreciate you moving forward with this. The expenditure for qualified employees, I know that came up with one of my colleagues, but essential employees that are being paid during this pandemic, COVID-19, this is an expenditure that will qualify. And that's just based on my extensive research, because I committed at the last council meeting that I was going to do my own research, and I was looking for ways that we could get hazard pay. And so I'm appreciative that basically this addresses a lot of what I had recommended, but I had categorized it as comp pay. So I'm glad that you found another category to do this, and you work with staff to bring forth this recommendation. Time is money, and so it was not a surprise to see the survey, because time is money. And at the end of the day, while most of the essential employees understand that they're not able to take time off right now, at some point we will be able to allow them to take time off once we get more staff and once this pandemic slows down. So my question to you, Mr. Donald, is, and maybe I missed this, I know there's a limitation on how much time can be accrued and carried over. And I think there's a limitation of comp time. Are we going to give an exemption for this category?
So yeah, I did answer that, and I did want to say, one thing I wanted to highlight is I don't believe that we should make any commitments based on receiving funding from the federal government. If you look, the United States Postal Service is a part of the lifeblood of our country, and a stimulus for them was denied. And so while the request for hazard pay is a fairly partisan proposal, it in no way is guaranteed to be accepted. And so what we are recommending as a part of the resolution, now of course we always defer to the wisdom of the council, and you can make whatever decision you so please, but it is my staunch recommendation that we simply put a provision in the resolution that allows for us to revert this hazard pay proposition fully to cash if reimbursed by the federal or state government. I think the second piece of that is, as I alluded to earlier, is that this is a completely separate category, and since it is limited to that basically one shift per month, it would not expire because it either has the cash benefit related to one shift per month, or it provides a leave category of one shift per month, depending on how it is exercised by the employee, and it does not expire as written. If you would like for it to expire, you as the council would have the ability to do so, but that is not my recommendation. It is my recommendation that it remain in place during the life of the employee's tenure with the city of South Fulton.
Well, one of the concerns that I know, we had a conference call with police and fire last Friday, and both of them were very the division commanders and both of them and both police and fire were in favor of offering some type of, well, we don't want to call us comp time, but some type of some type of benefit of this nature. But we were, horning in, this does kind of act like comp time to a certain extent. But one of the things that we were saying is that, yes, comp time for fire is being paid out per paycheck. With police, it was allowed to accrue up to a certain hour amount. I guess your concern was in that conversation is that as long as we allowed this type of time to sit on the book, it was going to increase our debt ratio. And so to hear you say,
not our debt ratios. I think you're missing my point on that. Is that
our liabilities? That you said it was a liability.
Correct, and I've said that on this call. It does increase our fiscal liability, but it defers it. And so,
okay. So, can I finish my question?
You gotta let me finish my question. Well, once I finish this clarifying point, yes, ma'am, no problem. So the point that you're making, I think, double downs on why we have addressed the benefit in this way. If you're currently always paying out comp time, and you're coming up with a new benefit that defers your liability, you do not want to pay them both out at the same time because it's unbudgeted and you cannot do so. And so to make the benefit valuable, but also defer the fiscal liability, you keep comp time and all of those other things in place so that the benefits continue to be paid out as budgeted, including overtime. But this new category, while it increases in value, it is deferred. And so that is the clarification that I think you were missing, is that the reason why this one does not expire or get paid out is because it allows our gladiators to receive their current pay as well as those additional benefits that are in place, but have this one if they actually need to take time off and things of that nature without messing with their day-to-day paycheck when they're already missing their extra jobs.
So my question,
finish now.
Yeah, no, I wasn't confused. And I was getting to that, but my question to you is this still considered a liability on the book?
Any type of additional compensation creates a fiscal liability. A fiscal liability simply means that it is something that you have to pay out at some point. The difference is that we are simply deferring the liability. So any contract, any new employee, all of those are fiscal liabilities. A fiscal liability.
Completely understand that.
Yeah,
My question to you is, when I talk to you about offering comp time, and I understand the difference between comp time, can I please finish my question?
I'm not stopping you.
Yeah, my question to you was, the concern was you were concerned about having additional liability on the book. I understand this is being deferred. So
that was my concern, is not having it deferred.
Okay, so my question to you is, you said that you are recommending that we do not put a time period on this, allow this to sit on as a liability, as a deferred liability on the book.
Correct.
Until the tenure for the tenure of the gladiators. What I am saying to you, or if we get federal funding in, then we can cash this out.
That's correct.
Okay, so my question to you is, why would you want to put this as a deferred liability instead of saying, okay, we should use this deferred, we should put a mandate that employees use this full deferred liability within a year of the time that it accrues?
Because we don't know how long the pandemic is going to last. And if we put that restriction on, we take a deferred liability and make it a current liability.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I have.
Thank you, Ms. Willis. Dr. Rao.
First of all, I want to thank the staff for putting this presentation together. I think it's well thought out and captured, at a lot of discussion points we had at our last meeting. I wanted to follow up on two things that were mentioned throughout the course of this conversation. One, I know while we want to be as responsive to the needs of the general public as possible to respond to the pandemic, I'm also very sensitive to what you shared about our financial state, if you will, and how delicate it is. So when we start talking about testing or do things or suggesting things that are kind of out of the scope of what and other cities are responding, especially a city as young as we are, I really would like to, one, get a better handle on how they're supporting the work of like public health departments in a way that makes sense for a city to engage. And two, just as we've done with our personnel, to survey the public to find out what the needs are, and us not just assuming we know how to best respond to the public's needs. There's been a lot of great effort and coordination among the council under the leadership under the mayor to do these food drives and all those, but I want to have a better sense of, whether we do it by a survey or the like, of what people are saying their immediate needs are in this time.
Yes, ma'am. You're right on target with that too. And I think that goes back to Council Member Khalid's and Council Member Gums' point that we need additional data. And I'll tell you, the mayor and I have had some conversations about this, pretty heated discussions. And I think he has, he kind of wanted some of that information to be done at the same time as we did this. And I mean, he'll tell you, I had to push back. We just haven't had the time and the resources. And so the next process is actually to list out all of our services, highlight the services. So I think I've told you that on these calls that we've had, the only thing we talked about was not just hazard pay. We're talking about different cities' responses. Some of them oversee public health, some of them don't. And so we're taking that information, and the next step is to kind of poll our residents along with the census and these other tools that we have. How can we bundle it to get additional info? And I'll just tell you, with our staffing levels and things now, it is definitely forthcoming and forthcoming quickly. But this was more of the low-hanging fruit. And so this is one where, when the mayor and I got in the room to discuss the process, we eventually agreed to do this first and then bring additional information back to the council on that broader, more complex area, because we don't oversee health and we still have other services that our residents want to give insights on. So you hit that nail 100% on the head, and it is forthcoming, but we are a little bit down the line on it.
Can I also ask, and this is a response to one of the respondent surveys in your presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you could share, and it's not necessary for this call, but I think for the benefit of the council and the public, how we're engaging the non-essential staff to continue the operations of the city.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Be helpful. Maybe on some of these outreach efforts, or maybe phone calls or whatever, that might be a way to tap those working from home.
And I can give you just some quick insights. I won't go deep into it, but our non-essential staff have been reaching out and have been eager to work. So in parks, you'll see that those facilities are now being maintained quite a bit, better than they were, because we've had the ability to just kind of clean and adjust and do inventory. And so while folks are not deemed essential because they're not dealing with the public per se, administrative leave ain't a free check. And so we still, to the credit of our, and I won't say her name, but our front desk receptionist, she has been adamant that she wants to do work to help the city. So she's pitched in and has been working on the 24/7 call center, or answering messages left for the city throughout all of the the voicemails that we've provided info to Miss Chris, in addition to putting this presentation together for me and managing all of the meetings and yada, yada, yada. She's been coordinating those non-essential staff members that have to provide internal services. And so we will give you an update on that, but our department heads have been tasked with keeping folks engaged. And of course, there's not going to be 100% engagement, but that is a focus. And I think for all of those staff members listening, we appreciate your service, and the city is making a very strong investment that isn't being carried out by all other municipalities around the country. But administrative leave is not vacation time, and our residents expect a level of service delivery. And so all of us, whether you're called to action now or in the future, should be prepared to do so.
Okay, Councilwoman?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Councilman Reeves, you're on.
Yes, thank you to Mr. Donald and staff. Because of this financial impact, as could be considered to be great. For clarity, the longer this pandemic goes, the city will have to look at furloughs and reduction of services in that order.
Yeah, so I think some people will likely just go the long route and go straight to reduction in force. I listen, I've been a labor commissioner before, basically in 2 states. In Georgia, I just didn't have Wagner Pizer, but I still led workforce and those things here and in the District of Columbia as well. And so you would have a stronger detriment if you did a reduction in force, because unemployment now is going to hover nationally around 14%. It's projected to exceed 26%, which none of us know what that means. It's never reached. The Great Depression was 26.4% unemployment. And so the longer you stave off unemployment, the stronger your local municipality and state organizations are going to last. And so I would look at, if forced to go on in that manner, to look at furloughs so that you are reducing the cost of your expenses, but you're also keeping your employees attached to you. It also would allow them to supplement their income by accessing unemployment insurance. And so I think that is the best way to go. And that's just my recommendation based on my unique expertise. Everyone would not agree with that. And as a governing body, you'd have to make that decision on whose expertise you want to lay with. I personally feel like mine is pretty good. I think another thing to look at is going back to Councilmember Rowell's question and yours, most of our employees are currently working. And so we only have 12% of our total employees on administrative leave. And so when you think about that, you know, the impact of our service delivery has pretty much gone untouched. We've actually been able to increase our service delivery during this time, adding new and unique things while also keeping people safe. And so knowing that that type of production and commitment has come from our staff, I would not recommend a reduction in force unless our fiscal position absolutely warranted. And now that's just as an administrator. As elected officials, you have additional other concerns that come into play. And so my recommendation may not be the one that you go with.
Absolutely. And for the record, I think you're a great subject matter expert. So, and then this part 2 is, if this pandemic with no national resolve extends to the 3rd quarter, when will the city be looking at the aforementioned becoming a reality? So
I don't think it requires the length of the pandemic going that long. It is basically based on unemployment and our residents' ability to continue to maintain the payment of tax revenues. And so going back to some information that guys may not have connected the dots on, the 75, I think it's close to 80% of our residents are homeowners. And so that is our largest amount of revenue. But as homeowners, most of them, I think it was 68% still carry mortgages. It may be more than that. And so you are paying your taxes on a monthly basis, which means throughout this time, we are still collecting those revenues. At such time that unemployment rises beyond an area that we can control, and it impacts the housing market to where we do not receive those collections, we now have negative impact on our fund balance, and thus will have to make adjustments to our service delivery and who we have employed. That has not occurred yet, and that is why I'm asking Mr. Malazi to give those type of thoughtful projections and insights, because then we can do a better job of understanding how safe we are through the end of the pandemic. If we are not negatively impacted by unemployment in that manner, and our residents keep the ability to maintain their tax payments, then we are able to continue government to a certain extent, because that's our largest revenue source. When those things change, our projections change and our recommendations to the council change. So as of today, we project to be fine through the balance of this fiscal year.
Oh man, well look here, thank you, and that's all I have. But I do want to just extend this as a team is an acronym to me that together everyone achieves. And you and your team has done an excellent job, especially being up to 4 in the morning through a storm. That's commendable, true soldiers. And kudos and shout outs to the receptionist that is willing to jump in and in places that where she can feel in different areas that she can be of help and assistance. And that just goes to the leadership that you have throughout the staff and the confidence that the staff has in you. And I have full confidence in you as well and your team. And so keep doing the great work. And thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Ms. Willard, this is your second time in the queue. You all.
Yes, my second and last. I just want to, I guess I have a little bit a positive outlook on this as it relates to furloughs. Having to work under through the recession that we previously had years ago for one of the top labor commissioners in the nation, which was Michael Thurman. He never furloughed employees. He never laid off employees. And he often talked about that. And this was through the recession. And so I just want to caution, because when we keep talking about furloughs, that does not, make our workforce feel at ease. And if we have to get to that point, Mr. Donald, well, I hope we don't. And I pray we don't. And I'm positive, that we will not. I hope that if employees do have to file for unemployment, that we make it an easy process for them. And what I mean is we work with the Georgia Department of Labor, and we let them know that this is coming down the pipe for our municipality. And we try to work, because there's a lot of confusion around people filing for unemployment. There's a lot of people getting caught up into the system. There's a lot of people who's not able to get through to file their claims. There's a lot of people, there's a long wait in some of the service centers, and I work for the Department of Labor, so I understand how the system works. So I would hope that we make some type of contact with the Department of Labor, and we make that process as simplified as we can if we have to go down that route. But I hope we don't. And that would be my only comment.
Ms. Willis, let me just jump in with you. I think it's made plain. I think we all agree that furloughs and layoffs are things that we're trying to work away from if we have to. So we're going to be doing everything in our power to make sure that our employees continue to work. And and I think Mr. Donald has made that plain.
Yeah, Mayor, I would like an opportunity. Let's make it even more plain. I think every piece of written documentation that I've provided has said that my recommendations are in place to avoid any of those things. And our projections do not allow for that in any way, form, or fashion for this year, which is the reason for this benefit. And I think it was a great reference to Michael Thurman, who was a great labor commissioner. I also served during that time through not only that recession, but also government work stoppages. And while in Savannah, we were the only institution in the state that did not have furloughs or layoffs. And in the District of Columbia, I think my reputation has reached world-class legendary, to where we turned around the workforce system in the country and also endured both of those things and did not have layoffs or furloughs. As a matter of fact, in the 10 different governments that I've worked in, none of them have experienced furloughs or work stoppages as such. So I think I'm probably in that category as well, and I'm pretty confident that we'll move forward in that way in South Fulton under the advisement that I've given to the council. So thank you for that vote of confidence.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Willis. Let's, Mr. Manager, I want to talk about this next step.
Yeah.
And the attorney is on the line too, right? Madam Attorney, you there?
Yes, I'm here, Mayor. I've had to unmute, but I'm present.
Yeah. Here's what I think we need to do in terms of a resolution. We've heard a lot of input from everybody on the council. Some of that input, Mr. Manager, that we can add to the Gladiator Benefits Program or delete from the Gladiator Benefits Program. But I would like to have a draft resolution. Now, let me say how important this is. I would like to have a draft resolution as soon as we can, but I want that draft resolution to dispense to all of the council as quickly as possible, so that there's any additional concern that they may have, it can go into the resolution where we have our final vote. That makes sense to you?
Yes, sir. What we'll do is we'll make sure to get the city attorney. I know the clerk's office has it, but we'll send her all of the information that we have related, including the memo and the PowerPoint, so that any information she needs to take out of there, I think we can use the draft minutes also from the draft minutes from today that have some of those concerns and things in it. We'll provide it to the city attorney so that she has all of those things by the first thing in the morning, and delivering the resolution would be 100% the initial draft in her court for the council to look at, evaluate, and make changes as you deem appropriate.
Yeah.
Again,
and Madam Attorney,
the only area,
Madam Attorney, I think it's important. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Mayor.
I think it's important, Madam Attorney, that we get this draft to the council for further comment as soon as possible, and have something that we can be halfway vote on at our next meeting.
Yeah, absolutely, Mayor. As soon as I get the information, I'll work on it the entire day, and I'll call, whatever personnel, call Mr. Donald with questions that I have. I don't anticipate it would take more than 24 hours for me to finalize.
Okay, that's good. And so we should have it. We should have the draft document in the hands of the council within 48 hours.
And Mayor, I think the only area that you would look at is that the vesting schedule time frame would still be this draft time frame, and it's probably good for you guys to debate it, but also for us to provide any supplemental recommendations based off any insight that the city treasurer might have, because we started this process before the federal government extended that time frame for their recommendations. And so that's the only consideration.
And I think you're right. I just want to have some type of resolution that's prepared that we can give some consideration for a vote on. It may still need some tweaking here and there, but that's why I want to send out to all of my colleagues so that they can put their their comments in.
Yep. Yes, sir. Yep. We'll get
okay. All right.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, listen. I just want to add. Listen, Mr. Donald and his staff have done a yeoman's job. I know, because he usually didn't call me after 12 o'clock, but now he does. And taking care of his home and then take care of everything else, along with the staff that we have in our city. Man, this has been a phenomenal job. And let me thank our council people for today. I mean, great feedback, great comments, help us to get to the next level. And I think this type of working together is what the people of our city really, really, really want to see. Risk management, HR, all of these people have done an outstanding job. I also want to thank all of you on the council who have done an outstanding job of bringing the light to the coronavirus, either individually or collectively with someone else. I think this city has done an absolute wonderful job in supporting its people, getting out information, and trying to feed as many people as we can. And on that note for feeding, I'm supposed to have 1,500 meals coming in to the city hall on tomorrow. They haven't given me the exact time yet, but I will let each one of you know so that you can come by and take those meals and disperse them to your most needed communities. Okay? So having said that, I can entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Properly moved and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Thank you all so much. This meeting is adjourned. I guess I got enough votes. Let me have some votes.
Aye.
All right.
All right, that sounds like enough. All right.
Mr. Mayor,
This meeting is adjourned. Yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Aye.
is there any way that we can get, somebody can get an email out to the council regarding the, if there has been any issues regarding the weather? Because I'm starting to get a lot of inquiries from community members who want to know.
Well, let me say this. Councilwoman Rao called me this morning about 4:30 and was telling me she heard on TV. And I immediately called the fire department, Chief Jones, who dispatched battalion people out around the city, and also the city manager was on the streets this morning. And both of them concluded that we've had some trees down and stuff like that, but nothing really major in terms of that looks like a tornado touchdown in our area. So we'll get something out about it.
I appreciate it. I don't know if something went out via media because people calling wanting to know where the tornado hit in South.
Yeah, it did. I can tell you that we had a touchdown, a reported touchdown near, I think it was Welcome and Ben Hill, but we reviewed that area and we did see some damage, but no structural damage. We also saw in the Union City portion of South Fulton Parkway, but again, the same lack of damage, but there are some cleanup efforts that are going on between the city, but the response required is minimal to our current knowledge.
So Miss Willis, we'll get that out to you, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so Mr. Donald, it did. Mr. Donald.
Yes.
So it did touch down in the Welcome All area. That's why I'm getting on.
No, that's what the report was.
Reportedly.
Survey. Yeah, so we've got we still working with ACEMA and others, and so we'll get something formal out. But by eyeballing it, there was no structural damage in the corridors that we saw.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. Appreciate you.